English translation, 481st contact, Wednesday, 14th of October 2009, 15:01 hours.
Ptaah, dear friend. It is good of you to come early this afternoon.
Because in the evening I am busy in the kitchen.
Afterwards, I have a lot of work to do until the early hours of the morning. Welcome and greetings.
My greetings also to you, dear friend. And right at the beginning of our conversation, I want to give you Quetzal's warmest greetings and ask you whether the work he recommended concerning the windbreak on the west side of the garden, the necessary new reforestation, and the planting of holly and all the other trees and shrubs has been completed.
Oh, I am very honored by your salutation. Thanks. But regarding the work, it is to say that I have arranged the whole thing, and a lot has already been done, but another big part will be done this year, and the rest next year. Yes, he already pointed this out to me repeatedly during his last visit. I still remember most of the stocking plan, so I know to a certain extent where to plant which trees or bushes. Yes, he measured everything in 1977, where which trees, plants, and bushes would thrive. And the reason why we have not been able to do everything according to his recommendations since then is that everything depends on money, which is why I had to wait to get it together. To do all the rest, as Quetzal considered and recommended, we still need about CHF 12,000.00. Most of these costs have now been collected, and we will be able to complete as much as possible this year or next year at the latest.
Do not be surprised by my salutation, because you are a very dear friend to me. But that everything is now flourishing according to Quetzal's recommendation will please him. I can understand your argument about cost.
You have also been a very good and dear friend to me since I have known you. But I am not surprised. I am also very deeply touched, especially because a human being of your age tells me such a profound word of friendship and love.
Age is not the determining factor, you know that, because it is the values of true humanity that are also expressed in a true friendship.
Thank you, Ptaah, you honor me. But now a question about something else. Is it possible for you to see what's always wrong with the Czech study group? Unfortunately, the group there is not functioning according to FIGU standards.
Unfortunately, I will be absent again for the next time until the 20th of November, but I will ask Florina to look into it, after which she can send you a message. What she does in this regard will be done in my name.
I see, thanks. So what about this time with extraordinary predictions and strong earth and sea quakes? And what about the moon bombardment experiment by NASA last Friday, on the 9th of October? With this experiment, they want to prove that there is water at the South Pole on the moon, respectively if water can be found at least there on the satellite. Yes, we have already talked about it several times before, and it was also explained that the moon contains a lot of water in the form of ice, especially at the poles.
We have actually talked about that and also gave the necessary explanations that there is a lot of water on the Earth's moon. Already my daughter Simyase gave you information about this in 1976. But the water on the moon is, as you say, true, only found in frozen form, which will also be proven by the NASA experiment. But water is not only to be found at the poles, but also in general in also frozen form in the deeper underground under the moon's surface.
Then I pull up what Simyase said in the contact reports and copy it right here where we are with our conversations.
60th Official Contact Conversation of the 8th of July, 1976 Pleiadian Pleiadian Contact Reports, Volume 2, page 276.
In the coming decades, and especially in the third millennium, you will experience surprises in all relationships, both with regard to the atmospheric composition of the planet and with the fact that Mars has the lowest life level and also much more water than terrestrial science has assumed so far, which, by the way, will also apply to the Earth's moon.
Of course you can do that, because it proves that you knew about this fact before it will be the case for the earthly scientists in the coming days and weeks. And what arises now with reference to earthquakes, etc., a strong earthquake of magnitude 6.1 occurs in the Hindu Kush in 8 days. Only 1 day later, there will be a seaquake in East Indonesia, which will have a magnitude of 7.0. Further, but small earthquakes follow in western Greece with a magnitude of 5.7 and another one in southern Iran with 4.8. This, of course, along with many other small quakes around the world, which occur daily but are not expected. Then we continue with a stronger seaquake of 6.8 in Indonesia near the island of Sumbawa. More is not to be mentioned until the 20th of November.
All right, thank you. Several times, Quetzal, you and I have had conversations regarding nanotechnology. Already at the 231st official contact conversation on the 9th of November 1989, Quetzal and I had such a conversation. I have printed out the whole thing for you here. At that time, one did not talk about nanotechnology here on Earth. Beside this printout, here are these two others, which are about 2 conversations between you and me.
Excerpt from the 231st official contact conversation of the 9th of November, 1989 Pleiadian Contact Reports, Volume 6, page 151.
Good. Svath once spoke of nanotechnology and nanoparticles and ultrananoparticles, which are supposed to be so tiny and tinier than tiny that they can be absorbed by bacteria themselves, which can then perish. However, these tiny and super small, respectively ultra-small particles are said to be life-threatening for all life forms when they are inhaled and cause cell damage in the brain and other organs, which then leads to death. Nevertheless, he says that the time will come in the near future when earthly scientists will start experimenting with nanoparticles. What can come out of this?
We have talked about nanotechnology before, but not about nanoparticles and ultrananoparticles. These will soon be on everyone's lips among earthly scientists and will be treated experimentally in the laboratories. These are tiny in the tiniest carbon molecules. If these are inhaled, no matter what life form, which can be from the super smallest to the most gigantic, then the particles get into the lungs and into the brain, but also into other organs, whereby then cell damage or cell destruction is the result, which leads to a quick death in the case of certain life forms, but can sooner or later lead to death in others. Spraying on plants can also cause lasting damage or death. It must also be said that nanoparticles and ultrananoparticles can be released or practiced in food by inappropriate, careless handling or deliberately by criminal private, state, military, sectarian, and terrorist elements, possibly endangering the lives of many millions of human beings. Carbon nanoparticles can be produced artificially in a wide variety of forms and tiny sizes, and can be used very valuably under great precautions, for example for medicine and cosmetics, for electronics, electrical and energy technology, but also for plant treatments, pest control, and for protective treatments for materials of all kinds, etc. A great deal of harm can be caused by improper handling of nanotechnology and nanoparticles, as well as ultrananoparticles, while a great many advantages and benefits for terrestrial mankind can be gained from their proper and responsible use.
Excerpt from the 434th official contact conversation of the 9th of September, 2006 Pleiadian Contact Reports, Volume 11, page 6.
Then another topic. During the last few years, nanotechnology has been developed very far on Earth, and also more and more different nanomaterials are being used for all kinds of things related to everyday use. You once said that nanoparticles are a health hazard to human beings. What must one understand by this?
Nanoparticles of all kinds are extremely harmful to health when they enter the respiratory organs and thus the lungs. In particular, this can happen through substances and other materials that are treated with nanoparticles and which detach themselves from the materials and float through the air, causing them to be inhaled by human beings. However, this inhalation of nanoparticles is not in any way harmless because they are so harmful to the human organism, as is also the case with asbestos particles, which also cause life-threatening diseases. This is a fact that has unfortunately not yet been recognized by earthly scientists and could have serious, health-damaging consequences for many human beings if the facts are not recognized soon and countermeasures are taken.
It will probably take time, even if we get your warning out across the world. On the one hand, our scientists are very narrow-minded, and on the other hand, there is already such economic commerce behind it that it is almost impossible to stop it.
Extract from the 443rd Official Contact Conversation of the 18th of February, 2007 Pleiadian Plerian Contact Reports, Volume 11, page 108.
But now another time a question regarding microfibers. You once said that they are just as dangerous for human beings as nanoparticles, because microfibers also allow harmful substances to enter the lungs of humans. Which substances are these? You have already said something about them in private conversations, but it would also be important for it to be recorded in writing. Hence the official question.
Microfibres, when dry, produce nanoparticles that are inhaled by human beings and that affect the respiratory system, especially the airways and lungs, which can cause asthma, as well as respiratory and lung cancer.
So these are the excerpts from some of our conversations on nanotechnology and microfibers, etc. Now I have been told that it has now also been discovered by scientists on Earth, etc., that nanotechnology poses major health risks, such as the fact that nanoparticles, for example, when they enter the lungs, can also cause cancer, as is the case with asbestos. However, as I know from you, nanoparticles can also cause enormous damage in all body organs, including the brain. But you have also explained that microfibers are not harmless in the same or at least a similar way, and are therefore also harmful to health when they enter the respiratory organs.
That is true, and to the full extent. But to talk about it again and to warn about it would be nonsensical, because in these 3 excerpts of conversation, everything necessary was said and explained. The necessary information was also provided, and the conversation between Quetzal and you were published in the Contact Conversations Volume 6, which also informed well-known scientists, as we know. But as it is usual with Earth humans, they did not care about the warnings, and only because they were brought by you and us, and not by earthly scientists or other people with well-known and great names and titles. It is only afterwards, when the warnings and predictions are confirmed, when disaster threatens or is already breaking in, that scientists and all sorts of great names and titles take up the whole thing and coin it on their person, as if they were the ones who had fundamentally recognized the matter and were now speaking plainly.
They just do not want to risk their image and their name. They always want to be the greatest and cannot stand the fact that a simple human being without scientific studies also knows and understands something. And since I am not a studied scientist and cannot hold any academic titles except my chic title, they do not pay attention to me or even call me a weirdo, etc.
A defamation and a misjudgment unparalleled, because all those who slander, insult, and disregard you in this way are not able to hold a candle to you, as an old Earth human's saying goes.
There is no point in going on about it. Something else. We have already talked about the volcano on Las Palmas in private on several occasions, and that already in 1975 on my great journey. I told some people about it then as well as in the last years, which is why I have been asked several times now if you could say something special about what might happen there one day. Because yes, the western flank of the volcano is unstable, could break off and cause a catastrophe. So if you can say something more in this regard, please do.
I could do that, but it is certainly better if I call up our private conversation for you which we had in relation to this during your great journey.
You mean you still also have recordings of that time when we privately discussed so many things which were naturally not reproduced in the contact reports?
Of course. At that time, you already made inquiries in relation to the Cumbre Vieja volcano at Las Palmas.
I remember that, and I did mention it.
Then I will call up the answer that I gave you at the time. But it will take a while.
Patience brings roses, but first it brings buds.
Ptaah after some minutes.
Here, this is it. It was, as I said, on your great journey on the 17th of July, 1975. At that time, I explained the following in response to your questions.
Private conversation excerpt from the 17th of July, 1975 31st Contact, Pleiadian Contact Reports, Volume 1.
Your question concerns the Cumbre Vieja volcano on the island of La Palma. The western part of the volcano, the west flank, as you correctly say, is extremely unstable and can slip into the Atlantic in the coming time and cause an enormous tsunami. But the east side of the volcano is also at risk, especially if a strong volcanic eruption occurs, as is also the case with the western flank. The reason for that lies in the fact that the volcanic mountain is internally very porous and so saturated with water that, with a strong eruption, the water can suddenly vaporize and rip the volcano apart due to a steam explosion. I do not want to talk of a certain time in relation to when that can happen or will happen, as it does not lie in my authority to name dates about that, because this belongs in the domain of terrestrial scientists and governments who, in regard to necessary measures, have to make determinations which I am not permitted to influence. Besides, the entire thing can be prevented if the correct measures are taken, which consist of a systematic, quiet dismantling of the part of the volcano which is at risk. And if it is not dealt with in this manner, then a catastrophe is unavoidable if it does not naturally occur that by and by only a small part of the side of the volcano, which is at risk, slips away. That will certainly happen again and again in the coming time, but to what extent the danger is thereby lessened is questionable. But the fact of the matter now is that an enormous part of the west flank of the Cumbre Vieja volcano can slip, plunge into the sea, and, within a few minutes, cause a gigantic wave of water, respectively, a giant tsunami, which can reach a height of up to 1,500 or even up to 2,500 meters or even more, and indeed according to the mass and speed of the falling material as it slips from the flank of the volcano. As a result of this, if it really happens, which is not yet established, the surrounding Canary Islands would be flooded with 50 to 150-meter high waves, and everything there would be destroyed. After which the gigantic waves would also reach Africa. If it really happens in the aforementioned manner, then the giant wave would spread out across the Atlantic in a semicircular form, and indeed in several waves of various sizes, and would speed through the ocean at 1,000 kilometers an hour, to, after around 8 hours, reach the coast of the USA, where it would cause the water of the Atlantic to rise up to a height of 100 meters and more, depending on the shape of the coastline in each place, and bury everything on the solid land under itself. The effects of the giant tsunami would also destroy the coasts and much in the interior of South America. England would also be affected by it, as also would Greenland and the coastal areas of all of Western Europe. This is the worst-case scenario, if the entirety of the western flank of the volcano slipped all at once and plunged into the sea. If, however, only small parts of the side of the mountain loosen and plunge into the sea, the results would naturally be correspondingly lessened.
Yes, that is exactly what you explained at that time, and I then also used these statements in order to write my first information leaflets about it, which Hans Jacob then also sent to diverse well-known geologists and so forth, because he thought that the information is important. However, his action did not bring him a response, as he assured me. Later, as he slowly became no longer in control of his mind, as I remember, he then explained that I had received the knowledge about the Cubre Vieja volcano from the devil personally, and he could prove that, because he personally saw that I had ridden through Wetzican with the devil on the back seat of my moped. He wrote a corresponding letter to a professor he knew, also copied it, and sent it en masse to many people around the world, as Michael Hesemann told me. From him, I also received a copy of the letter, which we talked about at that time, yes. Strangely enough, the letter is gone from the contact reports, as well as the records of the conversations we had about it at that time. I searched through everything on the computer, but found nothing more of it, which is why I will search everything again in the near future, because I think it would be interesting for the readers of the contact conversations to know what nonsense the man wrote and spread back then, in his confusion of consciousness, in order to defame me. But if I should not find anything more, then I will ask Michael if he still has the letter, and if so, if he can make and send me a copy, because then I could still insert it at our current place of conversation.
The letter would have to be included in the contact reports, because we talked about it some years ago and I also read it and you added it to our conversations. It is strange that the letter is not supposed to be there anymore, also our conversations in connection with it. But if, contrary to expectations, it should be, if you search everything again and find nothing, then you should actually ask Michael Hesemann about it. And if he can give you another copy, then you should insert the whole thing in our current conversations, because it would show the reader with what ridiculous, stupid lies and slander, as well as what pathological delusions they tried to silence you and are still trying to do so. Yes, the defamatory letter is not an isolated case with regard to the many ridiculous lies, fantasies, and blasphemies directed against you, but it shows how stupid and insane the people who slandered you have always been and still are.
Well, if I do find the letter or maybe get it from Michael, I will put it right where you just spoke. But now a question concerning the oxygen collapse respectively atmospheric collapse on the planet Akart, of which you spoke on the 3rd of February of this year at the 476th official contact conversation. What do I understand by collapse of oxygen in atmosphere?
An oxygen collapse, respectively, an atmospheric collapse, arises as a result of a massive over-impregnation of the atmosphere by the molecule CO2, which enters the atmosphere, as well as the oceans and other bodies of water, as well as the soil of the earth, and radically alters the climate. An oxygen and atmospheric collapse would be evoked by a massive excess of CO2, which means a bad fate for the entire Earth humanity, which would evoke a threatening catastrophe consisting of the destruction of life itself. This is caused by the incessantly growing overpopulation, through which constantly more monstrous amounts of CO2 are produced, and, with that, not only the air is impregnated, but actually everything up to the highest heights of the mountains and the deepest depths of the oceans is impregnated. The molecule already exists in dangerous amounts everywhere on the entire Earth, and unfolds its dangerousness, which does not only express itself in the destructive manner, being climate change, with all the natural catastrophes which more and more take the upper hand, which always demand more and more human lives and cause destruction which cannot again be repaired in a practical amount of time. And actually, all of that is founded singly and alone in the overpopulation of the Earth humans, who senselessly multiply like noxious vermin and thereby also produce more damaging material of all kinds, and CO2, and thereby impregnate the atmosphere and reduce the oxygen content. This, along with all other destructive machinations like the logging and clearing of the rainforests, the green lungs of the earth, and bound to that, the creation of infertile desert areas. Naturally, the earth has always contained the molecule CO2, but the CO2 content has drastically risen through the irrational pushing ahead of the overpopulation, which constantly burns more fossil fuels, such as coal, petroleum, and gas, principally through the internal combustion engines of road and marine vehicles, work machinery, and aircraft engines, as well as through nonsensical kinds of motorsports. In addition to that is still the enormous overproduction of animals, which are bred as means of nourishment for the humans, and which exhale and release from the colon horrendous amounts of methane and other gases. But also, due to the thawing of the permafrost, enormous amounts of all kinds of dangerous gases are released which enter the air. Further, it is also the Earth human himself who puts CO2 in the air through his exhalation, and indeed already in dangerous amounts, as a result of the monstrous overpopulation. Every year, in this way, the Earth human is to blame that millions of tons of dangerous materials are produced, along with other poisons, and are blown into the air, and that increases as the incessantly growing overpopulation increases. And actually today, Earth humanity stands on the brink of the serious threat that everything is leading to a collapse, as was the case with a cart. And if a stop, in a rational way, is not finally ordered to the overpopulation, then it all increases more and faster, whereby, finally, nothing more can be saved. If, therefore, the CO2 content continues rising unabated, then the catastrophe is no longer avoidable. And a rapid reduction can, singly and alone, only come about through the prevention of overpopulation, because actually only in that way does all the nonsensical production of CO2 also rapidly decrease. But if that is given no heed, then the oxygen content and the atmosphere of the Earth would be so overburdened by CO2 that a collapse would unavoidably result. And if the concentration of the molecules climbs in this manner, then the respiration of all relevant life forms on the Earth would be so impaired that it would no longer be possible for them to take up sufficient oxygen. When inhaled, the CO2 concentration already becomes deadly for Earth humans, and for the other actual oxygen breathers, when it only amounts to 8%.
That will naturally not be made public by the scientists and by the governments. Quite the contrary. They will hold useless climate conferences and make decisions which are even more senseless. As, for example, that within a certain period of years, the CO2 output is to be reduced by such and such a %.
Truly, this is completely nonsensical fussing and posturing because, even if that which is decided were to be achieved, the entire thing is not even a drop on a hot stone.
This is because, already in the time between the resolution and its realization, hundreds of millions more human beings will populate the Earth and produce still more filth and CO2 than the quantity that was decided upon. Therefore, the entire climate conference is counterproductive and idiotic, because the only correct solution would be one from conferences concerned with the reduction of the overpopulation, at which resolutions, which are effective worldwide, for the radical decimation of the overpopulation, would be made and carried out, and certainly by means of a worldwide, regulated control of births. This would thereby have to be such that many more completely natural cases of death come about than the number of births. That would be the real and humane solution, which could be carried out in a simple manner, and would also guarantee that all evils and catastrophes evoked by the human beings of the Earth can be reduced, and that the worst could still be prevented.
You have already taught that to the Earth humans since your youth, in that you sent your explanatory writings to those in positions of responsibility on the Earth and to all the media. Unfortunately, however, up to today, none of your efforts have borne valuable fruit. On the contrary, you have now been attacked and reviled up to the current time, while, since time immemorial, others with rank and name are built up as stars, although they simply only reveal that which you have taught for decades, about which you have warned, and which now is being frighteningly borne out as a result of climate change. This corresponds to an incomparable disgrace because it would only have been fair if your predictions had thereby been mentioned.
You should not agitate yourself on account of that, because I do not belong to the world of rank and name. But it must be said that when these people with rank and name are built up as stars, as you say, it is actually good that they do something, even if their wisdom has not grown from their own knowledge. But unfortunately, these rank and name people are too late with their deeds, because climate change can no longer be halted. There would probably still be something to save, respectively. The worst could still be prevented, if humanity finally became more sensible and stopped the overpopulation, which is indeed firstly and lastly the true reason why everything is going off course in regards to the climate and also in other ways.
When I consider all the warnings and predictions which you have written and spread worldwide, which, however, brought no success at all and did not bring the Earth humans to a change towards what is reasonable, there is not much hope, or none at all, that the correct thing will be done and a worldwide regulated birth stoppage will be arranged. But now, dear friend, I want to talk to you in a purely private way.
I suppose that will be the case without a doubt. But well, I also have some things that I want to talk to you about in private and that do not belong in the official part of the report of the conversation.